Shalom.
Shalom.
We are back with Bishop Todd. How you feeling?
Feel great. Appreciate everyone's prayers in regards to the way I was feeling. So everybody's prayers is much appreciated. All the texts and everything, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Very much needed time.
Absolutely. You've been working while you were sick, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Always.
Got another blessed message this Sabbath. Was the tribe of Dan cut off?
Mm-hmm. So first and foremost, we want to give all thanks and praise to the Most High, Ahaya, Bahashem Yeshaya, while we're walk. And we want to thank everybody for joining us here today. We know it might take a little while for people to come in. It's been a little while since we went live. So we want to remind everybody to like, share, subscribe. Since the last time we went live, I think we have something like 1,000 more subscribers.
Yeah.
And we want to thank everyone who's come in, who's subscribed to the channel. For those who haven't seen us live yet, this is for some of you, will be your first time seeing us live. You're in for a treat.
That's right.
A lot has changed. A lot has developed over the last couple of weeks, let alone the last couple of months. And we've had an opportunity to examine some of our doctrines, some of the things we've gone over, examine some of the scriptures. And we found pretty much all of it true, except for this particular point. We're seeing here that the Most High is adding more and more to our arsenal in regards to the way that we look at and understand scripture. So once again, we ask you all to like, share, subscribe to the channel. We want to send a shout out to our brothers and sisters across the four corners of the earth, our brothers and sisters in Sierra Leone.
Right.
Brothers and sisters in the Philippines, Shalom. We love you all. Hopefully we'll see you all very, very soon. Anything else? Tithes and donations. If you're a part of the body and you would like to contribute to the work, every amount, anything is very much appreciated. We appreciate all the help and support that we've gotten to this point. We ask for your continued support. And once again, we have our Cash App here above our head for those who would like to support the ministry. And also in regards to baptisms, we're receiving a lot of requests for baptism. So brothers and sisters, once again, if you would like to get baptized into the ministry, into the body, send a
right now. Baptisms on hold for right
now. Baptisms are on hold for right now, but we're still accepting forms.
Right.
So if you would like to be baptized, go to our website right here. I believe it's in the bottom banner, houseofjudahfellowship.org. And send in your baptism form, your request for baptism. We'll take all of those in and we'll make sure that we get to everybody as soon as we can, as soon as we possibly can.
Right.
Now, I'm kind of going to give us kind of a lead in to where we're going, just to give some people some time to come in before we jump in. So where did this come from? A couple of months ago, I believe it was last year, we went into a lesson that was entitled The 1,000-Year Reign. And in that lesson, we broke down we distinguished the difference between the Most High's kingdom and Christ's kingdom, right? They're two different things we found through precepts and understandings. And from that point, there has been an emphasis, particularly for me, in studying the 1,000-year reign as it stands. We know what the Most High's kingdom is going to be. But in finding out that these were two separate kingdoms, there was more of an emphasis on finding out what does the Messiah, the Anointed's kingdom look like. And in doing that, it brings on an entirely different understanding in the way that we see salvation, right? And the way that we look at salvation. As a people, we tend to view salvation as linear. Right? Put a 1 in the chat if you understand that the unity of Israel is important. All the tribes together. Put a 1 in the chat if you understand that. Right? But there's something that has been perpetuated for not just by us, right? By our church when we did our lesson on the tribe of Dan, but by other Israelite churches, by the Christian church, by the Catholic church, the wide understanding is that Dan has been excommunicated, right? The idea that the tribe of Dan is no longer considered an Israelite tribe. Now, there are precepts to support this idea. If you don't understand the history and the way that things worked back then, right? And in finding the understanding of the divisions of the early kingdom, the Israelite kingdom from the beginning, and the kingdom that the Messiah is bringing, you see that the two are closer to one and the same than you actually think, right? And we're going to go into this particular thing because this is going to lead us into where we're going to be going next, right? Where we're going to be going in the future. There's still more information that we have to go into. There's still more research that has to be done because that's going to be a massive lesson. But it all starts here, right? So the first place that we're going to go, if someone can put this verse in the chat, Romans chapter 11, verse 25. Again, that is Romans chapter 11, verse 25. We have people coming in. Welcome. Shalom. We are back. Romans chapter 11, verse 25, Elder.
Romans chapter 11, verse 25.
Uh-huh.
For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceit, that blindness in part is happened to Israel, until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in.
So it says that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in, which means the fullness of the Gentiles to this point, outside of the Judeans, those who lived in the southern kingdom of Israel, viewed the Israelites from the northern kingdom that had been gone for over a millennia as Gentiles. Right? Why? Because through the Assyrian captivity, they endured ethnic cleansing. Cultural standards changed. Cultures changed. The people changed. So not only did they look more like the heathen, they behaved more like the heathen. Some of them spoke the language of the heathen. Right? Now, this division that James talked about, the dispersion of the 12 tribes throughout the entire earth. Until there is unity of all those tribes again, there will always be blindness in part. Why? If you have a group of 7 people, right? And these 7 people know 7 different things and you split them up, chances are, if you put 1 or 2 together, you have some of the information. You put 4 together, you have some of the information, but you'll never have all of the information unless you put those 7 people back together. That means that the tribes from the beginning, unless all of them return and become one again, blindness in part will still endure amongst Israel. This is why it's so important that knowledge will increase for our people when we enter the wilderness. Why? Because all the tribes will be present in the wilderness at the same time. Blindness in part will no longer exist. Right? Put a 1 in the chat if you're following me here. Go ahead and read verse 26. What does it say here?
Verse 26. And so all Israel shall be saved.
How much of Israel?
All Israel shall be saved.
All Israel shall be saved. This is important. All Israel shall be saved. Read.
As it is written, there shall come out of Zion a deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob.
And shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. What does it say next?
For this is my covenant unto them, when I shall take away their sins.
When I shall take away their sins. Why is this important? Because the reason why the Messiah came was for the sins of Israel. Was Dan not a tribe of Israel? Did Dan not sin just like all the other tribes sinned? So what's the point of the Messiah coming if he didn't come to redeem even the worst of us? There was a man on the cross hanging for something that he was guilty of next to the Messiah. And even he received redemption on the cross. Right?
Right.
Read.
Verse 28. As concerning the gospel, they are enemies for your sakes. But as touching the election, they are beloved for the Father's sake.
They're beloved for the Father's sakes. Right? So there's been a mindset that has been perpetuated amongst our people in regards to how we view salvation as a nation, right? This has been perpetuated primarily due to 3 scriptures that have been misread and misinterpreted in regards to the tribe of Dan. in history that has been misread and misinterpreted, right? And this includes us as well. We're not a church that's immune to admitting when we're wrong about something. We've all been taught something, right? But eventually, when you rely on the Holy Spirit as opposed to your own knowledge, the Most High increases your understanding and increases your wisdom, right? But blindness in part has happened unto all Israel, right? So when we see or when we view the salvation of our people, we view our salvation excluding Dan, booting our brother, right? It has previously been taught by a majority of Israelites, Christians, Catholics, etc., including this church, that due to the tribe of Dan's betrayal of the Israelites and they're causing the children of Israel to fall to idolatry, and due to their involvement in the spread of idolatry amongst the children of Israel, that the Most High removed them as a tribe of Israel. The problem with this is that it can't be substantiated with the scriptures. None of this can be substantiated with the scriptures. And it cannot be further from the truth. Follow us here. We're going somewhere. See, Dan's history is intricate and complex. And their relationship with the rest of Israel is even more intricate, right? But they are still our brothers, and they wait for salvation just as we do. So let's begin to lay out the history. Dan's plight and Dan's history started out as a tribe in a lot of turmoil and mystery, right? But we're going to make a lot more things clear. Put a 1 in the chat if you're following us here. Make sure you're sure to share this lesson, like it, so that everybody knows that we're live. It's been a little minute, but we're working our way up into this thing. Right. Let's go to Genesis chapter 49, verse 16.
Genesis chapter 49, starting at verse 16. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel.
Now this is what people say. People will say, well, they'll say, well, Dan is one of the judges that destroyed the children of Israel. This isn't what this is talking about. This is talking about a time period, people. It's talking about an era in which everything changed for the nation, for the children of Israel. It's talking about an era. And we're going to prove it. See, Rachel, upon Dan's birth, from Bilhah named him judge. Dan means judge. This is important because it has to do with the time period in which the tribe of Dan went off. See, there was an era between the patriarchal era that existed from the time of, well, you have 3 eras. You have the patriarchal era from Adam to the 70 that entered into Egypt. And then you have the Exodus that began in Egypt when Israel became a nation. And then you have the time exiting the wilderness and going, and this is called the era of the judges, right? There was a time between the Exodus and King Saul where we actually had an established nation with a king, where there was no ruler whatsoever. This was where the Most High raised up judges as he needed them to govern the people. So there was no monarchy. There was no official government. There was no way of tying all of the tribes to one another. They were like independent states. So in the time of the judges, in which Dan had one of the most prominent judges, Samson from the tribe of Dan was the final judge, the 12th and final judge. This was the era in which the children of Israel went off. How do we know this? Because Samson lived before Dan left their original allotment. And you guys are going to see why this is important. You guys don't know, a lot of people don't know that the land that Dan was inhabiting later on in the northern kingdom was not the land that they were originally given. They left and they moved, and we're going to see why. But Samson lived in the time in which they were still in the southern kingdom, when they were still a part of the southern kingdom with Judah. Right? So the judges played a major role in leading the nation prior to the era of the kings. Judges came from all tribes, including the tribe of Dan. That's how we know it's not talking about judging the tribes of Israel. It's talking about the time period. They were just like any other tribe of Israel in the era of the judges, but something happened. Go ahead and read.
Verse 17. Dan shall be a serpent by the way.
He shall be a serpent by the way. Now, this is a dual prophecy because remember, this is talking about Dan in the last days. Right? Read.
An adder in the path
Mm-hmm.
that beateth the horse heels,
Mm-hmm.
so that his rider shall fall backward. Verse 18.
So that his rider shall fall backwards. So that means that Dan would become a stumbling block for the children of Israel. And we'll explain why that is. Read.
Verse 18. I have waited for thy salvation, O Lord.
I have waited for thy salvation, O Lord. Why is that important? See, a lot of people would say, this is just monologue from Jacob. That's what it would seem like. It would seem as if he was just monologuing. I have waited for thy salvation, O Lord. No. That statement was directed specifically at Dan. That means that Dan would do something that would be so horrific and so evil that he would have to wait on the salvation of the Most High for his forgiveness and for his mercy. Right? Now, what would he do that would be so egregious? Right? And it's not necessarily what Dan did, it's what he caused. It's not so much what Dan did, it's what he caused. Right? Watch this. So Dan would lead his brother astray and cause for them to fall from their position of power and morality. Dan would be a serpent, by the way, a venomous snake in the path. And the venom that Dan would bite the nation with was idolatry. So why the serpent? Put a 1 in the chat if you're following us here. Why the serpent? Let's go to Revelation chapter 12, verse 9.
Revelation chapter 12, starting at verse 9.
Uh-huh.
And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth.
All right. Make no mistake of what we're doing here, people. This is a history lesson. We're breaking this down in a way that's more academic than anything. So watch where we're going here. The serpent is now revealed to be the devil or Satan. Right? Read.
And his angels were cast out with him.
Lucifer. Right? So the serpent has been identified as Lucifer. Now, why is it that Jacob parallels the serpent, Lucifer, with Dan? See, Dan tells you why. Watch what Dan himself says in regards to his descendants becoming the children of Satan. Watch what he says here. This is the Testament of Dan, chapter 2, verse 5. Watch what Dan says here. Go ahead and read that, Elder. Watch this.
And whensoever ye depart from the Lord, ye shall walk in all evil and work in the abominations of the Gentiles.
He says, and you will work in the abominations of the Gentiles. What happens next?
Going a whoring after women of the lawless ones.
So here's one of the primary, this is only happens to 2 tribes specifically, right? Where it's specifically noted that these particular tribes would have a problem with marrying outside of their nation, meaning that they're tainting their bloodline and gene pool. Ephraim was one where he was prophesied to become a multitude of nations, and Dan. The difference is Dan left much earlier than the northern kingdom. Dan was rarely ever home. Anybody have a kid or a sibling that's never home? Never know where they're at? That was Dan. See, they're a part of the family, right? You know that they're a part of the family. You know that they live in the house. They're just never at the house. So eventually, where you might have had a close relationship with them at one point, that relationship becomes more distant. You stop knowing that person as much. You get confused about the way that they dress. When did you buy them clothes? When did you start dressing like that? When did you start talking like this? Right? We're going to see it. Watch this. Read. Watch this.
While with all wickedness, the wicked spirits, the spirits of wickedness work in you.
Watch this. Read.
Verse 6, for I have read the book of Enoch, the righteous.
Oh, wait, there's no book of Enoch, though. There was no testament. How was there no testament of Enoch when they were reading from it? Read.
For I have read the book of Enoch, the righteous, that your prince is Satan.
That your prince is who?
Satan.
The serpent. The tribe of Dan took on the serpent Lucifer as their prince. Why is this important? Because the prince of Esau is Lucifer. See, every tribe has a quote unquote prince. That prince is an angel. The prince that resides over the children of Israel, the angel that resides over the children of Israel is the angel Michael. Now, the prince that we have is the Messiah, it's Christ, right? But Dan has traded their prince for another. He says, I have read in the book of Enoch that your prince is Satan. Read.
And that all the spirits of wickedness and pride will conspire to attend constantly on the sons of Levi, to cause them to sin before the Lord.
So that is what made the tribe of Dan's sin so egregious. They affected the ones that were in the temple, the ones that communicated directly with the Most High. And when you attack the Most High's priesthood, the ones that lead everyone according to righteousness, now you've affected the entire nation. Follow me here. So Dan himself, the progenitor, makes it clear that the transgression of the children of Israel, the transgression of his children would be that they would have Satan as their prince. They would become part of the serpent. Watch this. Now, let's go to Amos chapter 8, verse 14. This is another verse that's commonly used to say that the tribe of Dan was cut off. This is one that's just misread. This is flat out misread, right? But watch this. We're going somewhere. We're starting off slow, but we're going somewhere. Watch this. Amos chapter 8, verse 14.
Amos chapter 8, starting at verse 14. They that swear by the sin of Samaria and say, thy God, O Dan, liveth, and the manner of Beersheba liveth, even they shall fall and never rise up again.
So what people use the scripture for is they say, well, Dan is fallen and will never rise again. That's what they say. Dan is fallen and will never rise again. No, that's not what that says. They that swear by the sin of Samaria. What was the sin of Samaria? Idol worship, right? The scriptures say that idolatry is the beginning of all corruption and sin, right? So idolatry is one of the most dangerous things that you can possibly fall into. It's a slippery slope. And a lot of times we have no idea that we're doing it. Right? Watch this. It says, if anyone swear by the sin of Samaria and say, thy God, O Dan, liveth. It's not talking about Dan. It's talking about the God of Dan. Who was the God of Dan? Remember what Dan said himself. Your prince is Satan. So if you have someone who's saying the God of the Danites, Satan liveth, they shall fall and never rise up again. It's not talking about Dan. It's talking about the people who serve the same God that Dan was serving. Yahweh. The God that Dan was serving was Yahweh. Watch this. So there's a lot to unpack in this particular verse. Watch this. So let's understand this. In order to fully understand the fullness of this verse, you have to understand the tone and the time period in which it was written. The prophet Amos this was written by the prophet Amos from the tribe of Judah, who prophesied during the reigns of Jeroboam II, not the original Jeroboam, Jeroboam II of Israel, and King Uzziah of Judah, right? This was less than 100 years before the fall of the northern kingdom. to the Assyrians and the wickedness of the nation was at its height, right? So what does this mean? In that last 100 years, the city was sieged in 721 BC. That means that in 821 BC, this was the absolute height of the wickedness of the northern kingdom, right? All of which is viewed as if Dan is completely responsible for. Everyone's like, oh yeah, this entire northern kingdom falling was entirely Dan's fault. If I'm not mistaken, it wasn't Dan who put the golden calf in their land. It was Jeroboam. It wasn't Dan who was the priest. It was Manasseh and Levi. See, Amos is not talking about Dan rising and never falling again. He's talking about the God that ruled the northern kingdom at that time, in his time period. That last 100 years of the northern kingdom, he said, because these people swear by the God of Dan, it will fall and never rise up again. Which is true. The children of the northern kingdom never went back to Samaria. The 10 tribes never went back to the northern kingdom. And they won't be going back until it's purged, until the Messiah's kingdom. Right? Follow us here. Put in the one in the chat if you're following us here. We're starting off slow, but like I said, we're going to get somewhere with this. We're going somewhere with this. We'll see who this God is that it's talking about shortly in the scriptures. Watch this. Let's go to Joshua chapter 19, verse 47. You there?
Joshua chapter 19, verse 47.
Mm-hmm.
And the coast of the children of Dan went out too little for them. Therefore, the children of Dan went up to fight against Leshem, and took it, and smote it with the edge of the sword, and possessed it, and dwelt therein, and called Leshem Dan, after the name of Dan their father. Continue. Verse 48. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Dan according to their families, these cities and their villages. So
this is the original allotment that was given to the tribe of Dan. Now, a lot of people say, oh, that's not, what does this have to do with anything? Well, it has a lot to do with everything. The original allotment for Dan sat on the coast, right? It sat on the coast with Ephraim to the north. It had Judah and Benjamin to the east and the Philistines to the south, right? They had nothing but water on their west. Dan was originally a part of the southern kingdom, right? Now, they were able to conquer the country, but would later leave this land in search of new land. Why? Why did Dan leave their original allotment? Why would they decide to leave the land that the Most High told them that they were supposed to be on? Watch this. We're going to go to Judges. Remember how I said that it was about the era? It's not about the judge. It's about the era of the judges. Watch this. Judges chapter 1, verse 34. What happened?
Judges chapter 1, verse 34. And the Amorites forced the children of Dan into the mountain, for they would not suffer them to come down to the valley. So their land got taken.
The Amorites came in, kicked their behinds, and booted them up to the mountains. So they were like, man, we can't, what are we supposed to do? We can't even leave them. We can't even go down to the valley. Now, keep in mind, the tribe of Dan was one of the largest tribes in all of Israel. So the land was already relatively small for the amount of people that were living there. But then imagine having another nation come in and take the majority of it. Right? So because they struggled against their adversaries and they didn't completely eradicate, this is why this happened. This is why this happened. The Most High, when they went into the land, what did he tell them to do? He said, kill everybody off the land. Dan didn't do it. And because Dan didn't do it, it came back to bite him. So they lost control of their land. And the fate of Dan from this point would change everything. The era of the judges. Watch this. Judges chapter 17, verse 5. Put a 1 in the chat if you're following. Watch this.
Judges chapter 17, starting at verse 5.
Uh-huh.
And the man Micah and his house had a house of gods,
Mm.
and made an ephod
Mm-hmm.
and teraphim,
Mm-hmm.
and consecrated one of his sons, who became his priest.
Now look at this. You got a man from the tribe of Ephraim who had a house of idols, a house of gods, right? And he made one of his sons the priest of his gods. What would happen later? Read.
Verse 6. In those days there was no king in Israel,
Mm-hmm.
but every man did that which was right in his own eyes.
Now check this out. This is why the era of the judges was so important. Notice how there was no judge born after the other. The Most High only raised up a judge when it was necessary. So in this particular time period, there was no king. There was no one law. There was no one order or government in Israel at this time. So every person did what was right in their own eyes. And what Micah thought was right was idolatry. This is why we stated earlier in the lesson, his name was more based off of the era in which the fate of his people would change, as opposed, this was his prophecy in Genesis 49 was a story being told. Dan, in the era of the judges, you will become a serpent and an adder in the path that will cause the children of Israel to fall. That was what Jacob told Dan. Simple, right? Watch this. Every man did what was right in their own eyes. There was no kings, just judges. Read.
Verse 7. And there was a young man out of Bethlehem, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite. And he sojourned there. That's it.
So there's this is a young man that comes across the path of Micah. He's a priest from the tribe of Levi. Well, he's not a priest. He's just a man from the tribe of Levi, right? So Micah himself was a man with many idols and graven images. Like he was like his house probably looked like the Vatican. He had images everywhere, right? And later on, a Levite man would pass, who Micah would make part of his house and consecrate him as a priest. Why? Because Micah said, well, I'm from the tribe of Ephraim. You're from the tribe of Levi. You're a legit priest. So why don't you come and stay with me and you become my own personal priest? Right? And this is what would happen. The young brother, the young man would stay and become the priest for Micah and his idols. So did idolatry start with Dan? No. No, it did not. It did not start with Dan. Let's see Judges chapter 18, verse 1. How did the Danites get involved in this particular story? Some of y'all probably looking like, well, okay, what Micah got to do with the tribe of Dan? Watch this. Judges chapter 18, verse 1.
Judges chapter 18, starting at verse 1.
And see, this is the problem. No one's actually gone into the legitimate history of Dan. No one's actually gone verse for verse to break this thing down as far as what was Dan's history. How did he get to where he got? Dan chapter 18, verse 1. Judges chapter 18, verse 1.
In those days, there was no king in Israel.
Again, it says this once again. Why is this important? There was no king in Israel. This means that everyone was doing what they wanted to do. Read.
And in those days, the tribe of the Danites sought them an inheritance to dwell in.
But they already had an inheritance. Read.
For unto that day, all their inheritance had not fallen unto them among the tribes of Israel.
So what that's saying is that they lost control of it. They didn't have all of their inheritance. So they say, you know what? We can't conquer these dudes. Let's just leave and go get something else. This is after Samson, by the way. So Samson was pre-move. This was back when Dan and Judah had a really, really close relationship. To the point to where when Samson got in trouble with the Philistines went to Judah and went to the leaders of Judah and said, hey, I need you to go and arrest this cat. And Judah sent their leaders over to Samson and say, hey, man, we got to take you in. I mean, we don't want to, but they said we got to bring you in. Dan and Judah at one point had a very close relationship with one another. The same way that the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Levi and Benjamin had a close relationship, Dan had a close relationship as well. Why? Because they were all under the umbrella of the southern kingdom. Right? Watch this. What would happen on their search for new land? Watch this.
Verse 2. And the children of Dan sent their family 5 men from their coasts, men of valor, from Zorah and from Eshtaol, to spy out the land and to search it. And they said unto them, Go search the land. Who, when they came to Mount Ephraim, to the house of Micah, they lodged there.
Oh, they passed by Micah's house. The 5 spies. Yeah. Now we see where the connection between Dan and the idolatry comes in now. They've come in contact with an idolater. So they stayed there, right? Watch this. So they sent spies out to scout the land in their journey, and they ran into the house of Micah and his priests. Now, it wasn't Micah that contributed to them picking up idolatry. Micah wanted them to leave. It was the priest. They asked the priest, what should we do? The priest to the idolater. They said, what should we do? And the priest said, keep doing where you're going. You're going to find what you're looking for. Right? So they asked the council of the priest, and he said to go forward, continue. Right? Let's drop down to verse 7. Let's go to Judges chapter 18, verse 7. Watch this.
Then the 5 men departed.
They left. Read.
And came to Laish, and saw the people that were therein, how they dwelt careless, after the matter of the Zidonians, quiet and secure. And there was no magistrate in the land that might put to them shame in anything. And they were far from the Zidonians, and had no business with any men.
So they had these 5 spies that were out there looking for land, and they're like, wow, this is easy pickings. You got all this beautiful land. You got these people out here dwelling like nothing in the world matters, living in tents, just living carefree, quiet and secure. There was no leadership, no government, no army. They said, man, this is the complete opposite of where we at. Where we at, these people got armies, they got governments, they got kings. Shoot, they got dogs to sick on us. They said, these people right here, we can take them out lickety split. Read.
Verse 8. And they came unto their brethren to Zorah and Eshtaol, and their brethren said unto them, what say ye?
What's going on over there? What'd you find?
And they said, arise, that we may go up against them. For we have seen the land, and behold, it is very good.
He said, hey, we gotta go. This place is nice. Read.
And are ye still? Be not slothful to go, and to enter and possess it, possess the land.
They said they looking at this thing like it's on Zillow. They like, hey, look at it. It's in budget. The kitchen's nice, bathrooms clean. What you waiting on? Read.
Verse 10. When ye go, ye shall come unto a people secure and to a large land. For God hath given it into your hands. A place where there is no want of anything that is in the earth.
It says it has everything that we need. It's got the square footage. It's got the extra room, got the man cave, big kitchen, large fridge, backyard for the dogs and entertainment. They said it's got everything. Read.
And there went from thence the family of the Danites out to Zorah, and out of Eshtaol 600 men appointed with weapons of war.
So they went up there and they said, listen, you got all this good land, this perfectly good, clean, put together land. And all we got to do is kill the owners. So this was their first transgression. Number one, they didn't do what the Most High said in the first place in regards to clearing off the land. They weren't the only tribe that did that. Then they left the land that the Most High gave them to go take another land that belonged to someone else, killing innocent people in the process. Right? Let's drop down to verse 17. What happens next? Something happens again. There's another interaction between the tribe of Dan and Micah. Go ahead.
Verse 17. And the 5 men went to spy out the land. The 5 men that went out to spy out the land went up and came thither and took a graven image, and ephod, and the teraphim, and the molten image.
Mm-hmm.
And the priest stood in the entering of the gate with 600 men that are appointed with weapons of war.
Mm-hmm.
And these went into Micah's house and fetched the carved image, the ephod, the teraphim, and the molten image.
Mm-hmm.
Then the priest said unto them, what do ye?
So the priest is standing there watching them take all of Micah's idols. They took everything. Just went in and took everything about the house. And the priest is watching like, what y'all doing? What's going on here? Now, why? Why would they go and take all of this man's idols? Why? Because the priest told them right. They sought counsel of the priest who told them to go forward and they would find what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. So when they went forward and found what they're looking for, what did it give credit to? The God that the priest was tending to. So when they passed by Micah's house again, they said, you know what? We need to take this stuff with us. Mm-hmm. Right? Yes, I did cut my hair. It's coming back, though. Don't worry. We're going to bring him back. Don't worry. Yeah, I know I've been getting that a lot lately. All right. So check this out. Go ahead and read that, Elder. He said, what do ye? What are you doing? Read.
Verse 19. And they said unto him, hold thy peace. Shut up.
That's what he said. Basically, be quiet. Hey, they're trying to take it stealthy. Everybody sleep. He said, what you doing? He said, shh.
Lay thine hand upon thy mouth and go with us.
Mm-hmm. And
be to us father and priest.
They said, hey, come, man, don't say nothing. Just come on. Come on. Mm-hmm. You ain't seen what we got over here. It's like I said, it's like Zillow. You find a perfect house in budget. Everything is like, but the problem is somebody living there. So it's like, well, we gotta go eliminate the homeowner. Mm-hmm. But and it's like, well, we need furniture, so we're gonna rob somebody else's house because we stayed at their house on the way there. Mm-hmm. They got some good furniture, so we robbed somebody on the way, and the person in the house see it. They're like, hey, come on now. So you're like, hey man, don't worry about it, just come with us. You ain't seen what this house look like. It's a room for all of us. Mm-hmm.
And be to us a father and a priest.
Uh-huh.
Is it better for thee to be a priest unto the house of one man, or that thou be a priest unto a tribe and a family of Israel?
He said, man, come be a priest to come be a priest to he pulling weight here, is what he's doing. He's like, hey man, for a whole tribe. He's like, man, you can keep playing the minor leagues, or you can step up here and join the pros. Offer you can't refuse, right? Think about it. Previously, this young cat right here wasn't even a priest before. He was just a regular dude.
Yep.
That got turned into a priest. And now you're like, dang, a promotion this fast? He said, come on, be a priest. Come be a priest to the whole tribe. Read. Watch this.
Verse 20. And the priest's heart was glad. And he took the ephod, the teraphim, and the graven image, and went in the midst of the people.
Man, he went and stole with him. He said, hey. He said, I'll help you. Read.
Verse 21. So they turned and departed, and put the little ones and the cattle and the carriage before them.
So they traveled. They traveled just like normal Israelites traveled, right? Protecting the people that were vulnerable. It says the men that spied out the land remembered the idols and the graven images and went back and took them, and then convinced Michael's priest to join them as well. So you can imagine Michael gonna be pretty ticked off. He done lost all of his graven images, worked hard, scraping and doing whatever he had to do to create these idols, and they took every single one of them and his priest. Drop down to verse 27. What happens next? Watch this. We're going somewhere, people. Watch this. What happens?
Judges chapter 18, starting at verse 27. And they took the things which Micah had made, and the priests which he had, and came to Laish, unto the people that were at quiet and secure. And they smote them with the edge of the sword, and burnt the city with fire. And there was no deliverer, because it was far from Zidon. And they had no business with any man,
Mm-hmm.
And it was in the valley that layeth in Bethsharab. This is, I had that word.
Betharab.
Mm-hmm. And they built a city and dwelt therein.
So what's interesting here is that the land that the Most High gave to them, they didn't do what they were supposed to do in eliminating everybody off the land. But with the land that you weren't given, and with the people that were completely defenseless, no help, destitute of help whatsoever, completely destitute of help, they went in and destroyed them and burnt the city down. A bunch of innocent people, right? What happens after? What do they do?
And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of their father, who was born unto Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Howbeit the name of the city was Laish at the first.
Mm-hmm.
And the children of Dan set up a graven image. And Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land.
So watch this. So now we see multiple tribes involved. You got Ephraim involved in this situation where it started. Then a Levite gets involved with this idolatry situation. And then Dan enters, takes the Levite, and they get involved with the idolatry situation. And then Manasseh gets involved with this idolatry situation. But Dan's the only one that gets the scolding for it. Dan's the only one that gets held accountable. That don't sound fair, do it? Sound like a lot of different parties was playing roles in this thing. And it's not like Dan was out here peddling this situation. We're going to find out who was peddling. Wasn't Dan. Right? Verse 31 says, and they set them up Micah's graven image, which he had made, and all the time that all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. Right? So the first atrocity that Dan would commit was utterly destroying innocent people destitute of help. After this, they built a city and they called this new land the land of Dan, the new land of Dan. The first image that was set up was long after the arrival. The first graven image that was set up in Dan was long before the arrival of King Jeroboam. Now we're gonna see about King Jeroboam here in a minute. King Jeroboam was from the tribe of Ephraim. Right? He says long before, so you see that Dan has built a culture prior to Jeroboam of idol worship. Keep in mind, originally when they went into their previous land, it was established based off of their belief in the Most High God, the Most High Ahaya, right? Ahaya, Ashar, Ahaya, for those who don't speak the Hebrew. For those who don't speak the Hebrew, that is I am that I am. So they established their original land based off of their belief in God, but they established their new land based off of idol worship. Now, the difference between this place is Dan was originally down south with Judah, but they went all the way to the northernmost part of Israel, which means that they went as far away from Judah as they could possibly get. Now, why is this important? Because that is absolutely the only reason why Jeroboam put the calf in Dan in the first place. See, if Dan was still in the southern kingdom, he would have never put that calf in the land of Dan next to Judah, who had a righteous king at the time. So it wasn't because of Dan's previous affiliation with idol worship that Jeroboam put him there. The reason why Jeroboam put it in the land of Dan is so that people would have to go in the opposite direction of the land of Judah for the feast days. He didn't want people going to Jerusalem. He said, oh, it's too hard to get to Jerusalem every year. Why don't you just stay up here? There's a good spot right up here in Dan. There's another one over here in Ephraim, so that if people tried to go south, people would go to Ephraim instead of going to Jerusalem. It was purely strategic. At no point does it say he put it in the land of Dan because Dan was already in idol worship. Of course they were, but that wasn't the reason that he put it there. He put it there to keep people from going south. Right? So they set up their own priesthood using a man from the tribe of Manasseh. They also used the images that Micah set up. And this would cause them to become the serpent that would destroy the nation. It was the catalyst for idol worship to be spread throughout the entire. Because keep in mind, watch this. Imagine. So this is what Dan's land turned into. Imagine the Vatican. I gave that example earlier. Dan was a land full of idols, right? And say, for example, you have no idols in your land, but you go to the land of Dan or you go to the Vatican for your feast day. And you see all of these idols. Idols for sale. You got it. So what happens when you go to the land of Dan? You're going to leave with an idol. A souvenir. Right? So this is how Dan was used as a catalyst to ship or to move idolatry. It was used like a Trojan horse by the enemy to destroy the nation. Right? Dan's establishment was established in a way that would isolate them from the rest of Israel politically, religiously, etc. They left Israel, went to their own little loner state that was technically wasn't Israel at all. It wasn't allotted to them. It wasn't Israel at all. So they went outside of the land of Israel and they set up this spot that would separate them and isolate them from every other tribe. Isolation spot number one. This was their first separation from the children of Israel. Watch this. 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 1 Kings chapter. What's that comment right there? 12. 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 28. What's this comment right here?
I'll open it up. Just see it. Can you see it?
Yeah. All right, Roy, we see you. 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 28.
1 Kings chapter 12, starting at verse 28. Whereupon the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold and said unto them, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem.
Jeroboam said, man, it's too hard for y'all to travel all the way to Jerusalem every year. Read.
Behold thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt.
So he said, these are the gods that brought you up out of the land of Egypt. He introduced them to the golden calf. Right? So check this out. He says, now keep in mind, this is the time where if you're going to travel to Jerusalem from wherever you were, this wasn't like getting in a car and driving a couple hours. This was you planning for weeks. You planning to be walking for weeks. So when somebody says, oh man, you don't got to walk all the way down there, we'll cut your travel time by 3 weeks. How many people you think gonna take that? And this is the king. He says, come on through. It's all good. What did he do? Where did he set it up? He said one where?
Verse 29. And he set one in Bethel, and the other set he in Dan.
The other he set he in Dan. Read.
Verse 30. And this thing became a sin. For the people went to worship before the one, even unto Dan.
So watch this. People weren't going to Bethel. People were going to Dan. Why? Because Dan had the ambiance. Dan was the Vatican. Dan was where you wanted to go to see the idols. So people weren't even going to Bethel. People were going to Dan. It says the people went to worship before the one, even unto Dan. They were going to the tribe of Dan. Dan wasn't the one who set the idol in their land. Jeroboam did that. But because of the fact that the culture in the land of Dan was built off of idolatry, it was like a melting pot for all of those 10 tribes to go in there and leave with an idol. It turned all of the northern kingdom into straight idol worshipers. Watch this. Go ahead and read.
Verse 31. And he made a house of high places.
They made their own temples. Read.
And he made priests of the lowest of the people.
He said, man, he took some scrubs and made them my priests. Read.
Which were not the sons of Levi.
Weren't even Levites. So fast forward to the era of the kings Jeroboam in efforts to prevent the northern kingdom people of Israel from returning to Jerusalem. Why did he want them to turn to Jerusalem? He didn't want them to see righteousness. See, the thing is, if the northern kingdom people who were enduring all of this wickedness went back to the southern kingdom and saw what righteousness looked like, they would go back to the northern kingdom and be like, what's wrong with you? And what would they do? They call for his head and new leadership. So he says, you know what? They can't go back. They can't go back. They can't go back. They need to stay here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So he placed one in the land of Dan, placed one in Bethel, right? And essentially what Dan became was the new land of Judah for the northern kingdom. It became their Jerusalem. It became the place where every feast people would go to the land of Dan to worship. And given how heavily steeped into idol worship the tribe of Dan was, they had become so religiously distant from the other tribes. This set the stage for the northern kingdom to free fall. So it wasn't even an intentional move for the tribe of Dan to spread. It wasn't even, I'll even go as far as say this. It wasn't Dan who spread idolatry throughout the northern kingdom. Dan was minding their own business with their idolatry. It was Ephraim's king, Jeroboam, that was responsible for the spread of idol worship by sending the people through Dan. So who was more responsible? See, Dan was the first tribe to make their national focus idol worship. Yes, terrible, right? But as far as saying that they were cut off for causing it to spread is a lie. They never caused it to spread because keep in mind, for hundreds of years they were doing their thing with the idol worship and nobody else was doing it. That's King Saul, that's King David, that's King Solomon. That's 3 kings over 100 years, not including the time between the space of the judges that existed from when Dan established their land to the era of the kings. Hundreds of years had passed, and idol worship hadn't become a central religion of the children of Israel or the nation. So Dan was minding their own business and keeping their idol worship to themselves. But keep in mind, their idol worship, were they going back for the feast? Mm-hmm. No. Dan stopped going for the feast. Dan stopped congregating. Dan stopped answering the letters from the other tribes. When they accepted idol worship, their relationship with the children of Israel went like this. So when people try to throw the fall of the northern kingdom into idolatry on solely the tribe of Dan, you don't know what you're talking about. Dan had idol worship for centuries, and none of the tribes had fallen to it. It was actually Ephraim. Put a 1 in the chat if you're following us here. While the tribe of Dan committed a great atrocity in being responsible for the introduction of idol worship, its spread is evenly distributed. The blame is evenly distributed amongst a few tribes who were also involved in its spread. And until this point, we never see the excommunication of Israel by God or eliminating them as a tribe of Israel. Notice how nowhere in here do we see the Most High said, I'm done with Dan because of this. Mm-hmm. Nope. So Dan over time would distance themselves further and further from the rest of Israel. And as time would go on, they would, even more so during exile, they would gravitate to ships. Mm-hmm. What happened? We went over this in the original Dan lesson. Judges chapter 5, verse 17. Watch this.
Judges chapter 5, starting at verse 17.
Mm-hmm.
Gilead abode beyond Jordan.
So Gilead, the reason why Gad wasn't able to come as quickly to the war as the other tribes, because they were beyond Jordan. They had to cross over the river Jordan to get to battle. Right? So they were the cavalry. They always got to the battle late. It just was going to happen. Right? They were like the perfect sixth man. Right? You know, starting five, somebody in the starting five get tired, you bring in the sixth man, tear it up. That was Gad. Right? And then what happened with Dan?
And why did Dan remain in ships?
Dan never even came home. Dan had been so disconnected from the tribes from the beginning of the time when they started worshiping the idols to this point that they didn't even know what home was. How could they know what home was when they left their home, the land that was given to them by God? How do you know who you are when you don't even know where your land is? It's the same argument that we as Black people make in the United States. Sure, you can say you're African American. Which country? It's a lot of those. Which tribe? It's even more of those. Which clan within the tribe? It's a lot of those. Dan is described as being a seafaring people, not in terms of the tribe of Zebulun and their fishing, but Dan was in connection to Dan had a connection to the Gentile world in terms of trade that didn't exist amongst the other tribes in the same way. That means that Dan had a special relationship with the Gentiles. See, the tribe of Asher was different because the tribe of Asher had a business relationship with the Phoenicians. Dan's relationship was not about business. Right? They were out doing things that they had no business doing. Marrying Gentiles. Specific types of Gentiles, though. Let's check this out. Ezekiel chapter 27, verse 19. See, Dan's story requires a detective. If you're not willing to do detective work, you're not going to find out the truth about Dan. You're just going to go with what everybody tells you, and what everybody tells you is that the tribe of Dan was cut up because of idol worship. If they were cut off because of idol worship, why was the tribe of Judah even dealing with them during the era of David in the time of peace? Why were the other Israelites tribes dealing with them at all?
And they weren't the only ones.
They weren't the only ones. Check this out.
Ezekiel chapter 27, starting at verse 19.
Dan
also and Javan, going to and fro, occupied thy fairs.
Check this out. He said Dan and Javan. Who is Javan? Javan is one of the descendants of Japheth. They were in Greece. He was going back and forth to Cyprus with the original Greeks. Now, I'm not talking about not talking about the Caucasoid Greeks. I'm not talking about the ones that are descended from Esau and Zepho. I'm talking about the ones who were originally there, the Asiatic Greeks. Read.
Going to and fro, occupied in their fairs. Bought iron, cassia, calamus were in thy market.
They were occupied in their affairs. They were behaving as if they had no relation to the children of Israel at all. Probably because they didn't know that they had any relation to the tribes of Israel at all. They left the land. Keep in mind, just because they named the lot in Laish that they took, they named it Dan, does not mean that that was a part of the land of Israel. They left the land of Israel. They weren't even in the land of Israel. There was nothing in that land that they took that tied them to the children of Israel whatsoever. Nothing. And that's important to note. Put a 1 in the chat if you're following us here. Dan is shown here having a companion in his journey over the seas, as he traded with the Gentiles for goods and other things. Javan was the son of Japheth, known to have been the progenitor of the Greeks. These are the Greeks prior to being conquered by the Edomites later in history. Right? It is this relationship, the relationship between Dan and the Greeks, that would cause for Dan to become further and further from their brothers, eventually leading to them partnering with the enemy. In some ways, partnering with the enemy in business and in enterprise, yes. In military efforts, never happened. Never happened. Because a lot of people say, well, Dan partnered with Alexander the Great in the Greek captivity to destroy the Israelites. Then you got some other scholars that say, oh, Dan partnered with the Persians to destroy the Israelites. Never happened. It never happened. Dan's connection to Javan proved instrumental, and not only the children of Israel, and not only them forgetting their identity as brothers of Israel, but also to the rest of the tribes of Israel as well. They played a pivotal role in not only them losing their identity, but in the entire nation losing their identity. Watch this. First Maccabees chapter 12, verse 5. Now we're going to prove that who the tribe of Dan is today. Why? Because now we can look, if we can make the connection between the tribe of Dan and who they are today, we can identify them in history to confirm whether or not they did the things that they're being accused of. Right? So now let's go into a little bit of history. First Maccabees chapter 12, verse 5.
First Maccabees chapter 12, starting at verse 5. And this is the copy of the letters which Jonathan wrote to the Lacedaemonians.
Mm-hmm.
Lacedaemonians. Jonathan, the high priest, and the elders of the nation, and the priests, and the other of the Jews, unto the Lacedaemonians, their brethren, send greetings.
So let's establish this first. Jonathan was from the tribe of Levi. He was the high priest of this era. And he was there with the elders of the nation. These are all the top people of Israel at that time. So you got the high priest, and you got the oldest and wisest of our entire nation sitting with him writing this letter. So this isn't one person who may be ignorant of something. There's a lot of very smart people sitting in a room talking to each other, writing this letter to the Lacedaemonians. Right? So they said that they sent a letter to the Lacedaemonians, their brethren.
That's what it says.
Interesting. So they wrote a letter to the Lacedaemonians calling them their brethren, the brethren of the Judeans. Ain't that interesting, Elder? Why would they call the Lacedaemonians their brethren? Aren't those white people? They weren't white at this time. They became white through whitewashing, just like we became white through whitewashing. Right? Well, watch this. Watch what it says here. Drop down to verse 9.
Verse 9. Therefore, we also, albeit we need none of these things, that we have the holy books of Scripture in our hands to comfort us.
So watch this. They said that we don't need any of the history. We don't need any of the artifacts. We just need the Bible to confirm that you are brother. Mm-hmm. So that means that Jonathan and the elders and the high priest were using the Bible to prove that the Lacedaemonians were their brethren. Mm-hmm. Read.
Verse 10. Have nevertheless attempted to send unto you for the renewing of our brotherhood and friendship, lest we should become strangers unto you altogether.
Now, this is interesting because there's an argument that's made among scholars. They say, well, it might not be referring. Well, when we examine the scripture, it might not be referring to Israelites. It actually might just be referring to one of the sons of Abraham from Keturah. Yeah, it might not be an Israelite at all. See, the problem with that idea is that nowhere in the Bible has one of Abraham's children been referred to as the brethren of the Israelites. That don't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
It don't. They say, well, because he says that we're descendant from Abraham. Well, Abraham's pretty broad. Abraham became the father of many nations. See, they come to that conclusion. How? I'll explain that again. They come to the conclusion because this particular verse makes the connection between the two through Abraham, right? And based off of prophecy, it says that Abraham would become the father of many nations. So they say, well, this may not be referring to the Israelites, but rather to one of the other nations that came from Abraham. Maybe from Keturah. Yeah. The problem with that theory lies in a multitude of places. Firstly, there are many nations that came from Abraham. However, the Israelites never regarded or referred to them as brothers or having a brotherhood. Show me that in the Bible. Show me in the Bible where one of the tribes that came from Keturah were ever referred to the children of Israel, ever referred to them as brethren or having a brotherhood. Esau, find it. One of the 12 princes of Ishmael, find it. The Arabs, find it. You can't. It's never happened. Never happened. That the nature of the relationship between the children of Israel and everybody else was always different. They never referred to them as brethren. Find me the scripture. Because keep in mind, they said that they were using the Bible. So find me the scripture where another nation is referred to the children of Israel as brothers to the children of Israel. It's never happened. Go ahead and read. Watch this.
For there is a long time past since ye sent unto us.
It says, so what they said here was, we have sent multiple times. We've sent letters trying to renew our brotherhood and friendship. Renew. And then they go on to say, lest we become strangers unto you altogether. Yes, lest we forget about you. And you forget about us. And he said, it's been a really long time since we spoke. Sounds interesting, right? Sounds like Dan. They wrote to Dan before in regards to the war, but they couldn't find him. Why? Because he wasn't home. Read. Drop down to verse 20. Watch what happens here.
Verse 20. Arius, king of the Lacedaemonians, to Onias, the high priest, greeting.
So now we see the king of the Lacedaemonians send a letter back to Onias, the high priest. They finally get a letter back. What does Onias say? Read.
Verse 21. It is found in writing that the Lacedaemonians and Jews are brethren.
Whoa, brethren. He said that the Lacedaemonians and the Jews are brethren. Read.
And that they are the stock of Abraham.
And that they are the stock of Abraham. So notice how here the argument that was made was that they were only related through Abraham. No. When he says that the Lacedaemonians and the Jews are brethren, when he says that they are the stock of Abraham, he's talking about both tribes. He's saying that the Jews and the Lacedaemonians are both from the stock of Abraham. It doesn't just say the Lacedaemonians. So you can't apply your theory that the Lacedaemonians were from another child because he's talking about both of them. That was from another woman because they're both, right? They're both from the stock of Abraham. Watch what he says next. Read.
Now, therefore, since this has come to our knowledge, ye shall do well to write unto us of your prosperity.
So he says, since it has come to our knowledge, what does that imply? That they forgot. Was there any other tribe that was prophesied to forget their identity? Tell me what other nation or tribe from Abraham was prophesied to forget their identity? The Lacedaemonians forgot that they were from their family. They forgot their identity. They thought they were somebody else. So he said, because this came to our mind, man, tell us what you've been up to. Tell us how things are going. Read.
Verse 23. We do write back again to you that your cattle and goods are ours, and ours are yours. We do command, therefore, our ambassadors to make report unto you on this wise.
So they say, we're going to let you know everything that we have. Let us know everything that you got, and whatever we have is yours, and whatever you have is ours. I'm going to break this down, brothers and sisters. So check this out. Firstly, never anywhere in the Bible, put them on the chat if you're following us. See, nowhere anywhere in the Bible has the Israelites as a nation ever referred to another nation or another tribe as their brothers. It's never happened. This sort of language is only used when one Israelite tribe writes to another, or when one Israelite writes to another, right? Another important fact to note is that the lineages of the children of Abraham are well recorded throughout history in the Middle East and beyond. The idea that they would have forgotten their kinship to one another is like like when the distance of a relationship is so great, it's unlikely. I'm gonna say that again. I'm gonna read this here. It says the idea that they would have forgotten their kinship to one another when the distance of their relationship is so great is very unlikely. That's like me being like, oh yeah, like I meet a random person on the street. I'm like, you know, we related, right? We both came from Adam. What? The example is, it's like forgetting your fourth cousin twice removed is technically your relative. Like, man, I forgot you, my cousin. Barely. They technically don't even got the same blood as you at this point. They somewhere else. But yeah, you talking about something, yeah, I forgot you, my cousin. It's like, man, we barely related. By this point, this is the Greek captivity. This is thousands and thousands of years removed from Abraham. So why would he write back saying, oh, I forgot? Especially when the children of Israel had no relation to the children of Keturah in regards to trade. Lastly, Arius, the king of the Lacedaemonians at the time, he wrote back stating the nature of their relationship being one of sharing possessions. Let me ask you this. Anybody in the room, do you share possessions with anybody that doesn't live in your household? Let me ask you this. Do you share possessions with your distant cousin? No. You share possessions with your siblings. The person you call brother or sister, correct? It was the same way with the Israelites. We don't see the Israelites share possessions with any nation outside of Israel. These are unsubstantiated arguments. The sort of relationship between the southern kingdom, this sort of relationship between the southern kingdom never existed with a non-Israelite tribe. As far as one of, okay, we're brethren, and because we're brothers, what's yours is mine and what's mine is yours. Never existed with the Israelites with any person that wasn't from an Israelite tribe. It's never happened, right? So watch this. Arius confirms not only the brotherhood, but also being from the stock of Abraham. They're both from the stock of Abraham. After examining the relationship that Dan had with the Greeks and their seafaring nature, it can be found in secular history as well as biblical history that the Lacedaemonians are indeed from the tribe of Dan. How do we make this connection? The Lacedaemonians are in Greece. It's well recorded that the Danites have very close relationships with the people in Greece. And then they write to people in Greece saying, we're brothers. Coincidence? I'm not sure that that's a coincidence. I'm not sure that it is. And another interesting point, when you look up the Lacedaemonians on Google, or if you have, brothers and sisters, if you have an annotated apocrypha, go to Maccabees chapter 12, and you'll see instead of that word Lacedaemonian, you'll see the word Spartan. So the Lacedaemonians and the Spartans are one and the same. So the Jews of the southern kingdom, people that look like us, wrote to the Spartans and said, we're brothers. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back to the Antiquities of the Jews by Josephus. And we're going to get into a little bit of history in regards to this topic. We'll be right back in a couple moments.
We were commanded to be at peace with all men. But like our Lord and Savior was an austere man, we must have that same spirit, to be strong, to be courageous, to never back down, to never fold, to never bend, to never compromise, to stand on this truth to the death of me. But oh yeah, we will keep it righteous.
Got the world in the two low switches. When they hate, we still love like crazy. Don't get it twisted, cause we ain't no chump, so we gon' keep this righteous, baby. Righteous, 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 righteous.
Don't test my G. I'm talking about G-O-D. War with me, then you fight against C. Not a brawler, all I like is peace. I grew up on DPG, Eastsiders, how I ride this beat. Israelite Empire, Lion the King, hard to see like Leviathan at the bottom of the sea. That's for my G-brews and my G-brews. Christ walking in the sea, that's what we do. Fly it in the ostrich or emu. Keep it righteous with the kings, move how we move. Armored up with the gospel and need truth. But keep meta, put caps in your sweet tooth. What you think, what you thought this was, you better keep your shell snail. I bring salt to a slug, know what I'm talking about? Hey, talking about stop playing with the boys, man. Yeah, and it's like that. Yeah, they see how we coming, man. They don't like that. Make them demons back when that light crack. Put a sword out if they wanna bite back. Nightcap. Moving ranks and never change. It ain't a game that they be playing. Ain't no hypocrites up over here. We keep the law. Do it just like Peter mixed with Paul under Christ, man. Seesaw, look at Esau. Fall as we rise, move to the east side. Slide, getting ready to dip. We front liners. Gold back gorillas at its finest. Satan get behind us. We walking righteous. Judah, Benjamin, Levi be moving like this. We do it for the 12 tribes, ain't nothing like this. Stick around, you might just get baptized and keep it righteous like this.
Got the world in the two low switches. When they hate, we still love like crazy. Don't get it twisted, cause we ain't no chump, so we gon' keep this righteous, baby. Righteous, 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 righteous.
Keep track of war. I'm feeling like Jacob, dwelling in booths, spitting the truth. Noble, legitimately bringing virtue to you. Personable, doing what I'm accustomed to do. Ethically bringing moral principles. Honorable in the sight, trying to be upright. Flawless victory with the sword, now that's a good night. Righteous, gotta be that sunny delight. Well-founded, sound, the reasonable type. Blameless in his sight, understand the living right. Pure, honest, and just, trying to walk like Christ. I'm valid and invincible, I'm about that life. If I fall down once, I'ma get up twice. I know my worth, cause I was bought with a price. I want the kingdom, I can't do fire and ice. Sinless, so I can't add vice. This is righteous counsel, just take the advice.
Got the world in the two low switches. When they hate, we still love like crazy. Don't get it twisted, cause we ain't no chump, so we gon' keep this righteous, baby. Righteous, 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 righteous.
Don't get it twisted. Don't get it
All right, we are back. So I want to put out a disclaimer here. With this particular lesson, there's a lot of detective work that goes into this. Okay, you have to. That's why it's kind of being broken down in the way that it is, because without understanding the full context of the time periods in which these events are happening, and without having a full understanding of the people that are involved in telling the story of Dan, I'm telling you this right now. Just using these precepts is not enough to fully understand why Dan isn't cut off and what fully happened to Dan. You have to understand the time period and the context of the era in which these things happened. So this is definitely a historical breakdown where you have to understand your history. And we're working on some things. We got some things going on that'll make these things easier in the future for people to understand. But if you have to go back and rewatch this lesson, please feel free to do so. But it is important that you know the history, right? Now, we're going into the Antiquities of the Jews by Josephus. This is book 13, chapter 5, paragraph 8. Put a 1 in the chat if you're following us here. Watch where we're going with this. This is going to be this right here is where we get into the meat of it. So check out the way that Josephus breaks down and interprets. Because keep in mind, when this was written, it was written in Greek. Josephus can read and write the Greek. So that means that his interpretation of this is a little bit more accurate than likely what the Masoretes put from the Hebrew into the Apocrypha, which is why the annotated Apocrypha reflects a little bit more of what Josephus is saying than the normal Apocrypha. So watch what Josephus says here about these same letters. Watch this.
Accordingly, as they returned, they came to Sparta.
They came to where?
Sparta.
They came to where?
Sparta.
Not Lacedaemon. They came to Sparta. Read.
And delivered the epistle which they had received from Jonathan to them.
So this is how we know that this is the same letter from First Maccabees. First Maccabees chapter 12, I believe. That's how we know that it's the same letter. They came to Sparta, not Lacedaemon. They came to Sparta. The two words are interchangeable. They're the same thing. But watch what it says. Read.
A copy of which here follows. Jonathan, the high priest of the Jewish nation, and the Senate, and body of the people of the Jews, to the
Ephori,
and Senate, and people of the Lacedaemonians, send greetings. If you be well, Salakia, and both your public and private affairs be agreeable in your mind, it is according to our wishes, we are well also. When in former times an epistle was brought to Onias, verse 13, who was then our high priest of Arius, who at that time was your king.
So this is much later on in history, right? So previously there was letter interactions between Onias and the high priest in Arius, whereas now we're seeing a different letter being sent here. So watch what is said here from Jonathan. Read.
By
Demotulus.
By Demotulus, concerning the kindred that was between us and you.
The what that was between us and you?
The kindred that was between us and you. So
check this out. The kindred between the two was already confirmed. Read.
A copy of which is here sojourn.
So what he did was he made a copy of the letter. He attached it to his current letter to say, hey, this is what happened in history. And now I'm sending you a new letter now. Go ahead.
We both joyfully received the epistle and were pleased with
Demotulus
and Arius. Although we did not need such a demonstration because we were satisfied about it. From sacred writings.
So they said they didn't need the demonstration. They knew from the scriptures that they were brothers. So they confirm again that the Bible confirms that these people are from the children of Israel. So let me ask you this. If it wasn't possible to prove that the Spartans were indeed from the children of Israel, how is it that we can't do the same thing? They were able to do it back then. We should be able to do it now, right? Read.
Yet did not we think fit first to begin the claim of this relation to you, lest we should seem too early in taking to ourselves the glory which is now given us by you.
So he says, we didn't want to start our introduction to you by saying that we're family. Didn't want to do that. Why? Because he said, lest we seem too early in taking ourselves on the glory that is now given to us by you. We can say that we are the brothers of the Spartans. Now, let me ask you this. If this was a distant relation, fourth cousin, why would it be a big deal that they were related? Aren't we all technically related? He says, yet we did not think fit first to begin the claim of this relation to you. We didn't want to go around telling people and just being like, hey, we're the brothers of the Spartans. He was like, no, we wanted to discuss with you first in regards to this relation. He said, we didn't want to too early take on the glory of our relation to you. Right? Read.
It is a long time since this relation of ours to you has been renewed.
He says it's been a long time since our relation has been renewed. Interesting. Where do you see in the Bible Israelites having any form of relation renewing with the Gentile nation? Somebody raise their hand and tell me. Anybody got something? Where in the Bible have the Israelites ever said, hey, Gentile, come and renew your relation to us? Keep in mind, anyone who is not an Israelite is a Gentile. The Israelites called Gentiles heathen. Where in the Bible do we see any kind of renewing of relationship, brotherhood, or friendship with a Gentile nation? It don't exist. It's never happened. It's never happened. But watch what he says here. Pay really close attention to what Josephus writes right here. Go ahead.
And we, upon holy and festival days, offer sacrifices to God. We pray to him for your preservation and victory.
Uh-oh. Now we get into the meat of this thing. Josephus adds further context to this letter through his translation, stating more clearly that Jonathan received the knowledge of their relation to the Spartans from the Holy Scriptures. Then confirms Jonathan speaking in regards to Israelitehood when he states that they pray for the preservation and make sacrifices on behalf of the Spartans on holy and feast days. Ever seen a heathen make a sacrifice on a holy day? It's never happened. It's never happened. In fact, Gentiles didn't have knowledge of our sacrifices. Why would the Israelites be making a sacrifice, making prayers on feast days for a Gentile people, for the preservation of a Gentile people? It never happened. Check this out. This could not have possibly been for any other nation. How could they the renewing of friendship, the renewing of brotherhood only happens at the feast days. The feast days, the reason why 3 times a year the Israelites were required to return home was so that they could renew their brotherhood, so that all the tribes could see one another, so that all the tribes could lay eyes on one another and see, oh, we're brothers. How you doing? I haven't seen you in this long. That was the renewing of the brotherhood. And why did he say it's been a long time since she came back to renew the brotherhood? Because Dan was away on his ships. He never came home. Dan never came back on the feast day to renew the brotherhood. Dan hadn't been going to the feast days since they picked up the idols, since they left the land of Israel in the time of the judges. So them renewing their brotherhood with the children of Israel hadn't happened. And because of that, just like King Aries said when he wrote back, he said, we forgot. And what did Jonathan say? He said, if we don't renew our brotherhood, we'll forget altogether. He said, we'll forget about you altogether. It's a complex history Dan has, isn't it? Put a 1 in the chat if you agree. Let's go to Psalms 147, verse 19. I'm sure y'all know this one.
Psalms 147, starting at verse 19. He showeth his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. He hath not done so with any nation. And as for his judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye the Lord.
Praise ye the Lord. So he said that none of the judgments, none of the laws that were existed amongst the Israelites, the Gentiles didn't know them. It wasn't given to them to keep the law. No one besides the Israelites were given the law, statutes, and judgments of Ahia. Why is this important? If this was a non-Israelite relative they were speaking to, why then would a prayer of preservation or making sacrifices on their behalf be necessary? Why? Ask yourself this question. Think about it. Only Israelites needed sacrifices for sins because only sin applied to Israelites. Gentiles didn't need to be forgiven of their sins because they weren't sinning. They weren't given a law to break. So why on the feast days were the Israelites making sacrifices on behalf of the Lacedaemonians if they weren't Israelites? They have no sacrifice to be made. Ever seen a Gentile make a sacrifice to our God? They don't need to. It wasn't given to you. So why are they making sacrifices on behalf of the Spartans if they're not Israelites? See, the judgments wouldn't apply to them. This has to be an Israelite tribe that they're talking to. No Gentiles were keeping feast days. If they were writing to a non-Israelite tribe, if they went and spoke to them and said, oh yeah, the feast day, they'd be looking at them like they're crazy. What feast day? What holy day? We ain't never keep them.
Yep.
Just the mere fact that Jonathan brought up the feast days to the Spartans should let you know that these people are Israelites. They were the only ones keeping those holy days. Gentiles weren't keeping those. The heathen weren't keeping those. Right? But we have further proof, of course. Right? What it says, that's where Black people get the concept of the idea of family reunions. Yeah, at a family reunion, what happens? Everyone returns. You see children that were born that you never met yet. Your cousin had babies that you never met yet. And now you're meeting an entirely new family. You're meeting husbands. You're meeting new wives, people who married into the family. You're seeing children that were adopted into the family. That's the point of this renewing of friendship.
Right.
Right? It's a coming together of all the people so that you can see, wow, how numerous are we?
Wow. Yeah.
David tried to number the children of Israel one time. The Most High got mad at him. He tried to do a census. Listen, all you need to see is the sands of the sea standing in front of you. Dan was one of them. Dan is one of them, not was, is one of them. See, the problem is that if we continue to keep thinking about salvation excluding the tribe of Dan, then there is no salvation. There has to be unity of the tribes. The Lacedaemonians or the Spartans have been biblically and historically identified as the tribe of Dan. With this in mind, we must now ask ourselves another question. If the tribe of Dan was removed from being an Israelite tribe at the fall of the northern and southern kingdoms, why would the high priests and elders not know of this? So now we have to go through the eras. Now, if we're asking, okay, if the tribe of Dan was cut off, what era were they cut off in?
Right.
If they were cut off at the fall of the northern and southern kingdoms, why didn't Jonathan the high priest or the elders of Israel know this? Because according to, if they were no longer Israelites, why are they writing to them as brethren? Why are they making sacrifices on their behalf? Why are they trying to renew the brotherhood? Why are they inviting them to come back to the feast days if they're not Israelites? Clearly, Jonathan and the high priest Jonathan the high priest and the elders didn't get the memo. And I would think that Jonathan the high priest of Israel at this time was a little smarter than we are. They had a lot more books to work with. They had a lot more history to delve into. Yet they weren't under the impression that the tribe of Dan was cut off. Now watch this. Why would they make sacrifices of restoration for a tribe that was no longer considered one of the Most High's chosen? Now let me ask you this. Let's go to anybody who we're going to sidetrack here. Let's go to Sirach in your Apocrypha, Ecclesiasticus chapter 47, verse 23. Because some would say, well, it's because Dan caused for the children of Israel to go astray, right? What does the Bible say? This is Ecclesiastes chapter 47, verse 23. It says, thus rested Solomon with his fathers, and of his seed he left behind him Rehoboam, even the foolishness of the people, one that had no understanding, who turned away the people through his counsel. There was also Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who caused Israel to sin and showed Ephraim the way of sin. And their sins were multiplied exceedingly, that they were driven out of the land. The Bible says that Jeroboam and the tribe of Ephraim was responsible for the fall of Israel. So why are we throwing it on Dan? Find me a scripture in the Bible where it says that Dan was responsible for the fall of the children of Israel. Find it. I can find one where Ephraim, though. And Ephraim's not cut off. Interesting. If they had a hand, and then you have some who say, well, it's because they partnered with the Greeks, because the tribe of Dan is the Greeks. They partnered with Alexander the Great in the Greek nation to conquer the children of Israel. Well, don't you think Jonathan would have known that too? Jonathan was living during the Greek captivity. Don't you think Jonathan would have known that the Spartans had something to do with them being destroyed? Why is he writing to him like nothing happened? While they're actively fighting the Greek army. They were actively fighting the Greek army, which means that if the Spartans were a part of that Greek army, they were fighting their brothers. Why would they send a letter saying, yeah, let's renew the brotherhood, acting like you didn't have a hand in our destruction? It's because you guys don't know your history. This is secular history. I'm going to show you something. See, I'm going to finish this point up right here. It says, if they had a hand in if the tribe of Dan, or if the Spartans had a hand in the destruction of the Israelites during the Greek captivity, resulting in the same fate, why would Jonathan the high priest and the elders reach out as if nothing happened while they were actively fighting the Greeks and whom their brethren were supposedly allied with? Why? This is another myth. Just as the Spartans or the Danites resisted the invasion of the Persians, yeah, that's right. Look at your history. King Xerxes of the Persians, the Spartans resisted him. So for anybody who would say, well, it's because the Spartans partnered with the Persians to destroy the children of Israel. Yeah, no, they didn't partner with them. They actually resisted them. And because they resisted the Persians, they eventually got defeated by the Persians, which means that they went into the same Persian captivity that the Southern Kingdom did. Voila. Try again. So even the rest of the northern tribes who didn't have to go through the Persian captivity, Dan went through it because they resisted Xerxes and the Persians. And then they also resisted the expansion of the Greeks under Alexander the Great, who conquered Israel. So this is history. This is regular history. Read a book. The Spartans never allied with Alexander the Great. They fought against him. So you can't say, well, they had a hand in our destruction under the Greeks. Never happened. Find me the history. Although the Spartans were an excellent military force, because of their refusal to make meaningful partnerships among the Greeks and so on, it made them as likely to lose battles as they were to win them. So people would say, well, the Spartans lost 50% of their wars in their battles. Well, it's because they were fighting all the Gentiles, and it was just that. If you look at Sparta was a small dot at the bottom of Greece. And then you have all of the rest of Greece. Now, if you're fighting one person in there, you're fighting all of them. So even though they were an excellent military force, they were as liable to lose as they were to win because they didn't have the partnerships. They didn't have the alliances with the other nations the way the other ones did. That's why they lost to Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great had an expansion of all and the unity of all of Greece coming against Sparta. Oh, but the Spartans joined their army and assisted in destroying the children of Israel. Never happened. It never happened. It is also important to note that if Dan's descendants would be cut off, Dan didn't know it. Don't you think of all the people, Jacob would have known, the one who was shown where Dan would be in the last days, and Dan, who sat with his father when he told him in Genesis 49 what would happen to him. Don't you think Dan would have known his children would be cut off? What did Dan say? Let's go back to the Testament of Dan, chapter 2, verse 8. Watch this. What did Dan say? Put a 1 in the chat if you're following us here.
Testament of Dan, chapter 2, starting at verse 8. Therefore, ye shall be led away with them into captivity, and there ye shall receive all the plagues of Egypt and all the evils of the Gentiles. Verse 9. And so when ye return to the Lord, ye shall obtain mercy. And he shall bring—
Whoa! Dan said, when you return to the Lord. Keep in mind, previously he stated, I read in the book of Enoch that that your prince is Satan. At some point, they've allied themselves with the enemy. But then he turns around and says, when you return to the Lord, you shall obtain mercy. And what is he going to do, Reed?
He shall bring you into his sanctuary.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Here's a problem. Here's a dilemma, brothers and sisters. Keep that in mind. If somebody can, put that he will bring them into his sanctuary in the comments section. We're coming back there. I want you guys to put a pin in this. Put a pin in the fact that he said he will bring the tribe of Dan into his sanctuary. His sanctuary. Watch this. Read.
And he shall give you peace. Verse 10. And there shall arise unto you from the tribe of Judah.
Unto the tribe of Dan. That means that someone is going to rise for the tribe of Dan. Who is it? Read.
Of the tribe of Judah and of Levi, the salvation of the Lord. And he shall make war against Belial.
He's talking about Yeshua the anointed. So he's saying, keep in mind, who did Christ say he came for? The lost sheep of the house of Israel. Christ said that I am not come for the Gentiles. But Dan just claimed him. Dan said he will and there will arise unto you. Not for the children of Israel. He said there will arise to you, children of Dan, a savior.
That's right.
Now, let's go back to the specific statement that was made here. This is gonna blow it up right here. Dan makes the statement that while his sons will go aside from serving the true God, along with Judah and Benjamin, along with Judah and Levi, they will return. But not only would they return, they would have mercy. They would receive mercy. But watch this. Not just will they receive mercy, but they'll be brought into his sanctuary. What's the problem with this? There's a serious problem with that statement if Dan was cut off. Let's go to Ezekiel chapter 44, verse 9. Ezekiel chapter 44, verse 9. Oh, do you got that?
I got it.
Mm-hmm.
Ezekiel chapter 44, starting at verse 9.
Mm-hmm.
Thus saith the Lord God, no stranger, uncircumcised in heart or uncircumcised in flesh, shall enter into my sanctuary.
Whoa! If Dan was cut off, he's a stranger. He said no stranger. This means that Gentiles physically, even converted Gentiles, can't enter into his sanctuary. He says no stranger, uncircumcised in heart or in flesh, shall enter into my sanctuary. Read.
Of any stranger that is among the children of Israel.
So how can Dan be brought into the Most High sanctuary if he's not an Israelite?
Wow.
If he's no longer one of the tribes of Israel, how is he going into? Not only is he going into the sanctuary, he said that he will be brought into the sanctuary by the Messiah and the Most High. They'll be brought into the sanctuary. In the 1,000-year reign, in Christ's millennial reign, there will be no Gentile in flesh or in faith that will be admitted into the sanctuary. Only the children of Israel can go in. If Dan was cut off, they were no longer considered a part of the tribes, then he would not be allowed in, or let alone be brought into the sanctuary. While he is not listed as one of the tribes, so a lot of people are going to say, well, why isn't he in Revelation chapter 7? Why isn't he in Revelation? Why isn't he listed as one of the tribes? Because I wasn't talking about tribes. That was talking about the 12,000 leaders and rulers. That wasn't talking about tribes. It was talking about who he was going to take leaders from. Dan isn't considered in that lot because of what he did. Dan made his prince Satan. He has no right to rule in the new kingdom. Has nothing to do with who's a tribe and who's not. It said it was talking about leaders from each tribe. It didn't talk about whether or not they're a tribe or not. It didn't say, well, if you're not on this list, you're not a tribe. While he is not listed to be one of the tribes in the 12,000 rulers, in the 144,000 rulers with Christ, likely due to him being a catalyst or a Trojan horse used by Satan to destroy Israel, he too will obtain mercy of the Messiah, just like us. See, if y'all think that we haven't done worse than what Dan did prior to us realizing who we are, you're delusional. Yet, is the Messiah not coming back for us?
He's coming.
I promise you we did much worse than Dan. I promise you we did much worse than Dan did. We've had idols. I know, and if you're a Christian, don't tell me that you ain't have the white Jesus somewhere up in your house at some point in your life, that you didn't have the cross hanging around your neck. Don't tell me if you were a Muslim that you didn't have idols. Definitely don't try to lie if you were a Catholic and say you ain't have no idols. Like you didn't fornicate, like you didn't commit adultery, like you didn't do this, like you didn't do. Don't lie. Don't lie. Majority of us living like straight heathens and devils, and some of us have come to the knowledge of who we are and still live like straight heathens and devils. Talking about some Dan ain't a tribe. Come on now. It is important to note here that Dan does not speak of the Messiah independently of his sons. He doesn't say he's going to come for the Israelites, not me, not my children. He says he's going to come. He claims him. Yeshua only came for the lost sheep, the lost ones of Israel. Know that that the end cannot come until the fullness of the nations come in. Until all the tribes return again, Dan knows this. And he takes claim of the purpose for which the anointed one would come. He says, we are a part of that return. When we come back to God, we'll receive mercy and he'll bring us into the sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that the story of all of Israel? Watch what Dan said. This is the very last verse in the Testament of Dan. Watch this. It's Testament of Dan, chapter 2, verse 27. Very last verse. Watch what this says.
Testament of Dan,
Mm-hmm.
chapter 2, starting at verse 27. Nevertheless, Dan prophesied unto them that they should forget their God and should be alienated from the land of their inheritance.
Now watch what that says. He says that they'll be alienated from the land of their inheritance. Now, some would say, well, that means that they left the land altogether. No. The land of their inheritance is the land that they were given in Joshua, not the one that they took in Judges. Now, keep in mind what it says here. Actually, go ahead and finish that. It says what? It says that they'll be alienated from their land of their inheritance. What else? Read.
And the race of Israel.
And the race of Israel.
And the family of their seed.
Unlike any other tribe. See, and the wild part is that they even alienated now that we've learned that we're Israelites. We've alienated Dan knowing who they are. So even after we became a nation, we still forget Dan. He said that Dan would become alienated from their land, from their race. They would forget that they're even Israelites. And he said not only would they forget that they're Israelites, they would become alienated from their family. They would be separated from all the other tribes. They'll be treated like a black sheep, like they'll be put out of the house and everybody would forget that they ever lived there. And when they find out that they do live there, it's like, oh yeah, but you basically live outside the house so you can stay out there. That's what we did to them.
Yep.
See, people will look at this and say, well, alienated means that they were cut off. Dictionary. Dictionary. Dan was estranged. Estranged. That word alienated means to be estranged. And the word estranged means to cause someone to feel isolated. Dan isolated themselves when they left the land of Israel for a land that was outside the land of Israel. They isolated themselves when they picked up the idols and stopped coming to the feast days to renew the brotherhood. They isolated themselves when they left the Middle East and went to Greece and never communicated with nobody. Estranged means to be isolated. To cause for someone to feel isolated. Consider this. See, estranged, and keep in mind the word estranged means it's only temporary. It's not permanent, right? Consider this. And I want you guys to really think about this for a moment. Was not our families for over 400 years estranged from our land, race, and family? When's the last time our people have set foot in Israel? Are we not estranged from the land of our inheritance? When's the last time that one of our generations knew that we were descended from the children of Israel? Are we not estranged from our identity? When's the last time? How many of us knew going back that the Gadites were our brothers from the tribe of Gad? That the Puerto Ricans were our brothers, that the Mexicans were our brothers? Or did we create a wall of hatred towards one another? They think they better. They think that they're this. They think that they're that. Did we not alienate ourselves from our family? Have we not been alienated from our family?
Yeah.
Were we cut off? We were alienated from all of these things, just like they were alienated or estranged from it. Were we cut off too? Paul said, God forbid. Dan, from the moment he set foot in his allotted land, was looking for a way to get out of it. It's not big enough. What the Most High gave Dan wasn't good enough. From the moment he set foot in his land, it wasn't. He was already looking for ways to leave. By the time the northern kingdom had fallen, he had been estranged from his original allotment for over a century. Let me say that again. By the time that the nation fell, he had been estranged from his original land for not just a century, but for hundreds of years. He hadn't been to his original land. That means for hundreds of years, they were keeping idol worship. They had been estranged from the laws of God, from their people, from their family, from their race. Right? It's like if you take a child, like, it's like, for example, Ric Flair. Ric Flair got stolen by traffickers, right? It's like you have a kid that's young, right? Because keep in mind, Israel was still in its infancy at the time. We hadn't become a nation yet. It's like someone taking a child and raising them and telling them what they are. And what they are has nothing to do with who they are. They never met their family. They never saw their family become a full nation in righteousness. So all they know is what they're told. They've completely isolated. And by the time they become adults, when they meet their true family, it's like, well, you're not really family to me. I don't know you. You don't know me. Right? By the time the northern kingdom had fallen, he had been estranged from his original allotment for over 300 years. He had found himself gone from his new land, much of the time traveling with the Greeks. So even after he got to his new land, he found himself gone all the time. To the point to that where they had forgotten their identity, and Jonathan needed to remind them, lest they themselves forget that the Lacedaemonians were of the stock of Israel. It took a letter. It took a letter, and they said, hey, here's the evidence that we're brothers. Watch this. Let's get Sirach chapter 36, verse 11. Ecclesiastes in your Apocrypha, chapter 36, verse 11.
Sirach 36 and 11, starting at 11, actually. Gather all the tribes of Jacob together.
Some of them.
All of them.
Some of them.
All of them.
All of them except Dan.
All of them.
He said, gather all the tribes together. But what did it say, read?
And inherit thou them, as from the beginning.
Whoa, in the beginning, Dan was a tribe. Oh, there's the dilemma for the Dan is no longer a tribe of Israel people. He says, gather all the tribes of Jacob together and inherit thou them as from the beginning. In the beginning, Dan was sitting there with Jacob. Read.
It's like verse 12. O Lord, have mercy upon the people that is called by thy name, and upon Israel, whom thou hast named thy firstborn.
Wait. Have mercy upon Israel except Dan.
That's not what it says.
Have mercy upon all of the nations except for Dan. No. He says, have mercy upon them that is called by thy name.
Yep.
And upon Israel.
Yep.
Read.
Whom thou hast named thy firstborn. Verse 13. O be merciful unto Jerusalem, thy holy city, the place of thy rest. Verse 14. Fill Sion with thine unspeakable oracles, and thy people with thy glory.
Watch this. Read.
Give testimony unto those that thou hast possessed from the beginning.
Have possessed from the beginning. Didn't he possess Dan in the beginning?
From the beginning.
Read.
And raise up prophets that have been in thy name.
The book of Sirach echoes the sentiment spoken by Dan to his sons in the Testament. However, it is important to recognize the reference to all tribes of Jacob. He says all tribes of Jacob. Not some of them, all tribes of Jacob. Right?
Yep.
In the beginning, the tribes were as follows. Because he said, possess all the tribes of Israel as it was from the beginning. The tribes were as follows: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin. Those were the tribes. Those were the original 12. Right? Joseph represents the double portion of Ephraim and Manasseh. When you include Ephraim and Manasseh, 14. When you include Ephraim and Manasseh, it's 14. Right? All the tribes of Israel were given land allotments, including Dan, that counted for 13 tribal allotments. Levi had a certain area that was carved out for him. So all the tribes of Israel got land except for Levi. Levi didn't have land. They had suburbs that surrounded the temple. Right? So watch this. This is important. This is where we begin to segue into where we're going next. Right? So all the tribes had land allotments, which accounted for the 13 total tribe allotments. Dan had one as well. What we find is that although Dan is not part of the 144,000, they do in fact have an allotment of the land. They do in fact have their allotment of land and are listed among the tribes entering the gates of the kingdom of Yeshua, the anointed in the millennial reign. Oh, wait, now we're going forward. So if Dan was cut off, why does he have a land of inheritance in the millennial reign? If Dan was cut off, why does Dan have his own gate entering into the city of Christ? If he's cut off. Why? Doesn't make sense. See, let's go to Romans chapter 11, verse 25. Chapter 11. Actually, yeah, let's go there. Let's go there.
Romans chapter 11, starting at verse 25. For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part is happened to Israel, until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in.
Until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. Verse 26.
And so all Israel shall be saved.
All Israel shall be saved. Read.
As it is written, there shall come out of Zion a deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob.
Didn't Dan say this exact same thing? Dan echoed the exact sentiments that Ecclesiasticus and Paul are bringing across. The letter of Paul echoes the sentiments of Dan's writing in his testament. Paul states that there will not be full understanding and wisdom until the rest of the lost sheep be rejoined to the rest of the children of Israel. He goes on to state, similarly to Sirach, that all Israel will be saved by the Messiah. Paul also brings up the covenant that was made with the Israelites in the wilderness, one that Dan took part in. Go ahead and read that verse 27.
For this is my covenant unto them, when I shall take away their sins. As concerning the gospel, they are the enemies for your sakes. But as touching the election, they are beloved for the Father's sake.
What does it say? Read.
For the gifts of the calling of God are without repentance.
The gifts and the calling of God are without repentance. Read.
Verse 30. For as in times past have not believed God, yet have now ordained mercy through their unbelief.
Have now obtained mercy through their unbelief. Read.
Even so have these also now not believed, that through your mercy they may obtain mercy.
Would put a 1 in the chat if you would say that Dan fits into that description. One who has obtained mercy through unbelief. See, if Dan was part of that covenant, would he not be included in this sentiment? Dan was there in the wilderness and made the covenant with the Most High with Moses. His tribe was there. When we look at the narrative in totality, it was the tribe of Ephraim that had the idol that Dan took with them. It was the tribe of Manasseh that became priests for them. After this, the Bible tells us that Jeroboam from the tribe of Ephraim caused the children of Israel to sin and led them to being driven off the land. We can skip that one. We already read that. While Dan was the catalyst, it can be argued that Ephraim played a larger role in the spread of idolatry than the tribe of Dan. The tribe of Dan will obtain mercy through Christ as the rest of the tribes will. And they just won't have the same status as the ruling class, the 144,000. But their involvement and brotherhood and promise of Israel should not be discounted, nor should they be treated as Gentiles. I'm going to say that again. Although they do not have 12,000 leaders and rulers, their involvement in brotherhood and promise of Israel should not be discounted, nor should they be treated as Gentiles. They are not Gentiles, nor have they ever been Gentiles. We must teach them and pray for their restoration as our forefathers did, like Jonathan did, like the elders did. They made sacrifices on their behalf. Now, what I stated earlier in regards to the tribe of Dan having an inheritance, because a lot of people would say, well, this isn't an inheritance, it's just a land allotment. Mm-hmm. Let's go to Ezekiel chapter 48, verse 1. Now we're segueing into our next lesson.
Ezekiel chapter 48, starting at verse 1. Now these are the names of the tribes, from the north end to the coast of the way of Hethlon, as one goeth to Hamath. Is that correct? Hazranan, the border of Damascus northward, to the coast of Hamath. For these are the sides east and west, a portion for Dan.
A portion for who?
Dan.
Why is that? Now watch this. This is how. Now a lot of people would say, well, this is just talking about the allotments from the Old Testament. No. Remember, Dan's original allotment was on the coast. Dan's original allotment was south. This allotment is in Laish. This allotment is in Damascus. It's inland. This allotment that the Most High is giving him for the millennial reign is in the land that he took, not in the land that Joshua allotted. This is how we know that this isn't talking about the old land allotments. This is a new land allotment. This is a future land allotment. Right? Read.
Verse 2. And by the border of Dan, from the east side unto the west side, a portion for Asher.
So how do we know that? So how do we know? Because when the original land was allotted, Asher was the northernmost tribe of all the lands. Now Dan is the northernmost tribe, as he was when he moved to Laish. Right? Now we're dropping down to verse 29. So some would say, well, this isn't an inheritance, it's just land. Watch this. What does it say? Read.
This is the land which ye shall divide by lot unto the tribes of Israel.
Wait. Did he just call Dan a tribe of Israel?
That's what it says.
Oh, no. It's not possible. Dan was cut off. Read that one more time.
This is the land which shall divide by lot unto the tribes of Israel for inheritance.
For an inheritance. Dan still has an inheritance. Dan is still called a tribe of Israel. Read.
And these are their portions, saith the Lord God.
Now, this is the land that was allotted for the future. Now, watch what happens here for those people, because there was a brother that made a comment, Elder. Let me see if I can pull up this comment right here. And it's not anything, bad, but we had to let the brother know. He made a comment under one of our posts here. See if I can find it. The question posed in the title of this lesson is, was the tribe of Dan cut off? And this was the comment that the brother put under there. He says, yes, he was. That is why in the 12 gates of Christ's kingdom, there's 12 gates in Christ's kingdom, not 13. Goes to show God himself can kick blood out of the royal family if you don't act right. Now, of course, we sent him a message with the scripture about Christ's kingdom in the gates. And he said, interesting, I'll have to look into that a bit more. All praises. I hope the brother sees this lesson. But I'm going to have the elder read the very verse that I sent to him in regards to that very comment. He said there's 12 gates, not 13. He's absolutely correct. Elder, read verse 30.
Verse 30. And these are the goings out of the city on the north side. 4,500 measures. Verse 31. These are the gates of the city these gates of the city shall be the names of the tribes of Israel.
It says, so check this out. It says, and the gates of the city shall be after the names of the tribes of Israel. So that means that whoever is listed here is a tribe of Israel, right? Put a 1 in the chat if whoever is named here is one of the tribes of Israel. It says right here, the gates of the city shall be after the names of the tribes of Israel. Keep in mind, once again, this never happened in Israelite history. So this is not something that happened in the past. This is something that's going to happen in the future. And we're going to explain this when we go into our next lesson. So watch this. He says here, go ahead and start reading that, Elder. The 3 gates northward.
3 gates northward. 1 gate for Reuben. 1 gate for Judah.
2.
1 gate of Levi.
3. We got our first 3 tribes of Israel. Reuben, Judah, and Levi are confirmed. What are the next ones? What does it say?
And the east side, 4,500 and 300 gates.
Now, some people would say, why is it that these gates could be the gates to the kingdom of heaven? Different measurements, people. Go and read Revelations and the measurements for the kingdom of heaven. They're not the same as this one. So the measurements for this city is different from the measurements for the other city. And remember, there's two different kingdoms, the Most High and Christ's kingdom. We're going to break this down next week. So we're at 3 right now. Go ahead and read that. It says, in the east side, 4,503 gates. Go ahead.
And 1 gate of Joseph.
1 gate of Joseph.
1 gate of Benjamin.
1 gate of Benjamin.
1 gate of Dan.
Whoa! Dan has a gate in Christ's kingdom, but I thought he was cut off.
Says 1 gate of Dan.
Dan has a gate. Looks like Dan's going to be entering into the Christ kingdom. Interesting. I thought he was cut off. I thought he wasn't a tribe of Israel anymore. I thought he was treated like a Gentile. Christ didn't get the memo. Neither did the Most High. The Most High designed it. Now, some would say, well, where is Ephraim and Manasseh? Joseph got a double portion. Doesn't mean that Joseph doesn't represent those 2 tribes. There was and always is 12. Ephraim and Manasseh share a gate. They share Joseph's gate. Read. Now we're going to drop down to verse 35. Of course, it goes on to name the other 6 tribes, right? Drop down to verse 35, Elder.
Verse 35. And it was round about 18,000 measures. And the name of the city that day shall be, the Lord is there.
Now that's how we know that that's how we know that this is a future prophecy. There was never a city in Israelite history that was called the Lord is there. Future prophecy. This is in the book of Ezekiel. The chapter is right there. The chapter and book is right there. Ezekiel chapter 48, verse 35 is right there.
You're speaking to find in peace?
He said, what book? Ezekiel chapter 48. Anybody can go and read it. Right? So this is a future prophecy regarding the divisions of the promised land. This will be fully broken down in our next lesson in the future, and the lesson that we'll do in the future that will detail Ezekiel, that will detail from Ezekiel what the millennial reign of Yeshua the Anointed will look like. So we're going to be going into an in-depth understanding on what the Christ kingdom is going to be like, right? We know that these are not the allotments that were previously given to the tribes through Joshua, because Dan was assigned land in the southern kingdom. But here, his land is in the northernmost part of Israel, where he took land later on in the book of Judges. We also know that this is not the Most High's kingdom, because the measurements given for the gates of the city are different. Not only from the Father's kingdom, but from anything we know in the history of the Bible. This is completely different measurements for a city, right? When we break down the full understanding of Christ, of the kingdom of Christ in the book of Ezekiel, it will become clear. So we'll be going to break this down more in the future. It is important to note that this is a future prophecy that where we see that only the tribe of Dan, this is important to note that in this future prophecy, we see that the tribe of Dan not only has an inheritance of land, but also has a gate for entering for entering the city, which is named after him. Therefore, Dan will be restored with his brethren. Dan was not cut off. And another important thing to note, in every allotment, I went over this with the elder, actually. I believe I should have added it in here to close out. Ezekiel chapter 44, right? Let me see here if I can find this here. Ezekiel chapter 44. Charge the gates of the house. Stand next to a frame with shit items. One moment, brothers and sisters, and pull it while I pull this up.
While you're looking that up, 1 second. Everybody, do us a favor and check out our new YouTube channel and give us a follow there. We much appreciate it.
Also, our Patreon as well. We're going to be posting more content on Patreon as well. Discussional things, different things like that for the people. So keep an eye out for that as well. If you're not on Patreon, join, and we'll be posting 3 times a week.
Yeah, and we did not forget the children either. We have something called Cub Talk coming out for the children pretty soon. So it's going to be some nice content for them. I just put it up on the screen.
Oh yeah. So what we'll do is in the description, we'll make sure that we put a link to the new channel in the description, where you'll be able to find that. It's House of Judah IFC Media channel. So you'll be able to go there and check out different things as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, I should have done that when I set up the stream in the first place.
Okay, so check this out, brothers and sisters. So this is Ezekiel chapter 45. I want to show you this. Moreover, when he shall divide by lot the land for inheritance, he shall offer an oblation to the Lord, unto the Lord, an holy portion of the land, a length that shall be a length of 25,000 reeds, and a breadth of 10,000. This shall be the holy borders thereof round about. So he's giving, and now watch this. When you drop down to verse 2, it says, Of this there shall be for a sanctuary 500 in length with 500 in breadth, square round about, 50 cubits round about for the suburbs thereof. So he's building a sanctuary, and around this sanctuary is the suburbs. Who are the suburbs for? And of this measure shalt thou measure the length of 25,000 and a breadth of 10,000, and it shall be for a sanctuary in the most holy place. The holy portion of the land shall be for the priests and the ministers of the sanctuary, which shall come near to minister unto the Lord, and shall be in the place of their houses in the holy place for a sanctuary. Now watch this. Verse 8, and the land shall be his possession of Israel, and my princes shall oppress wrong one. I'm gonna have to get this put together for the next lesson here. Well, essentially, brothers and sisters, what it says here is that what it states, I have to find it, is that there will be a sanctuary with the measurements of this one that is put in every inheritance for the land of Israel. That means that every tribe that has an inheritance in the land of Israel will have a sanctuary where the Levites will perform their sacrifices and teach. So if Dan is not a tribe of Israel, why do they have priests in the midst of their land making sacrifices on their behalf? Once again, it would not be necessary, right? But we'll go into that in the next lesson. But every land of the inheritance would have one of these temples in a suburb for the children for the children of Levi on it as well. I'll find that and post it at some point soon. But keep an eye, brothers and sisters. Keep an eye open for an extensive lesson on an in-depth look at the 1,000-year reign. We're going to break down the breakdown in extensive detail what that reign is going to look like, and what the detail, what life will be like, what life will be like, what will be occurring, and different things like that. What will Christ's role be? What will he be doing? There's going to be an extensive breakdown, so keep a lookout for that as well. That is the conclusion of our lesson. I hope you brothers and sisters were edified by this lesson and were blessed by it. Put a 2 in the chat if you've heard any of the information that was brought out here today in regards to the tribe of Dan. Put a 2 in there if you've never heard it before. If you've never heard this information that was brought out before, put a 2 in the chat.
Also, any questions or comments? Anybody?
Questions or comments? Questions or comments? All praises. Lots of twos. Lots of twos.
I love it.
Yeah. And it seems like a small deal. It seems like it's not that important, but when you understand that the tribe of Dan, all of the Israelite tribes are important. If there's no unity, if we can't come together as a people, then we never become a nation again. So we need our brothers. And the fact of the matter is that when we talk about going on our mission trips and we talk about going and seeing the tribes and doing outreach, we never think about the tribe of Dan. Nobody ever goes and says, hey, we need to minister to the tribe of Dan because we believe that they're Gentiles. When the fact of the matter is that was something that we were taught, but it's not something that's true.
Right.
And even if all put a 1 in the chat if any of the information that we brought out is faulty.
I'd like to know that myself.
I won't see any ones. There's no holes in any of the information we brought out. It came from the Bible, came from the scriptures. But the truth of the matter is that as time goes on, the Most High continues to reveal more things. Chances are a majority of people are going to disagree that the tribe of Dan was cut off. Why? Because that's what they were taught. All the Christians believe it. The Catholics believe it. The majority. I haven't heard anyone in my research and doing this. I haven't seen any. Literally zero, no, not even a comment on any Reddit, nothing. I've never even seen a comment that says that the tribe of Dan wasn't cut off. It's a worldwide consensus that the tribe of Dan was cut off. But if we continue to believe or look at our family as the enemy, we never come back together as a family. Yes, Dan is estranged. Yes, he was isolated, but so were we.
That's right.
Right? We need all of our brothers to go back to return. And until they return, blindness in part will continue to happen unto the children of Israel. Do we have any questions? Hosea chapter 1, verse 10. It shall come to pass in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people. It shall be said unto them, ye are the sons of the living God. Absolutely.
That's right.
Even more so then, because keep in mind, it's wild because they've been isolated for so long. They've been separated from our people for so long. Even when we found out we were Israelites, we still rejected them. Right? So it's definitely a learning curve, and we have to begin to teach our brothers and sisters, the gypsies, the Druids, our brothers and sisters that are scattered, especially them, because I mean they went through a different level of ethnic cleansing than we did, and it was voluntary. So of course they're going to look different than we do, but they're our brothers and sisters nonetheless. Any questions? We haven't been live in a long time, so I know y'all got some questions hanging around there. Kwam Yasharallah, Israel rise. Kwam Yasharallah.
Right.
Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? And like I said, this is more so a historical lesson. This is like detective work. So if you need to go back and take a look at this lesson again, please feel free to do so. Definitely, I would suggest doing that anyways. I think that this is probably more of there's more history in the original Dan lesson, but I believe that this is the more important Dan lesson that we went into here today. And I think that it'll be a pretty good segue for going into the reign of the Messiah.
That's right.
And don't look like we got any questions. All right, brothers and sisters, we're gonna leave you all to your Sabbath. We've gotten probably got about an hour and a half left of Sabbath. So we want to say thank you all for continuing, for all those who became new subscribers, all those who came in over the time when we were off.
Right.
And the time where you guys haven't seen us, we are going to be back on it. May not be live to teach the lessons every week, but brothers and sisters will make sure that content gets posted. We're working on a lot of different new things for the church. Little rebranding happening.
That's right.
We're doing some work as far as making sure that we're getting some content for the Patreon, getting some things set up as far as podcasts and different things goes to make sure that we have as much content coming out for you all as possible. And of course, we need laborers in this work. So brothers and sisters, if you're following the church, you want to become a part of the body. Sisters that are a part of the body, we have a women's ministry. If you would like to be included in the meetings that happen with that, send an email, send a request for baptism.
Yeah, definitely. Send an email.
Yeah, send an email to houseofjudah.elders@aol.com, or go to our website, houseofjudahfellowship.org. Get in contact with us in regards to becoming part of our body, becoming a part of the family. We're going to make sure that we're doing a lot of interaction to make sure that all of our family feels included, and that everybody knows that they're a part of a family, they're a part of a body. We're going to be doing a lot more meetings, especially amongst the sisters. We missed you all as well. All praises.
All praises.
We missed you all as well. We're going to make sure that we're live, even if it's for a short time, to just let you guys know what's going on, keep you all updated, and so on and so forth. So we appreciate all of your support. Once again, if you would like to support the church with tithes and donations, tithes for members, donations for those who are not members, we have our Cash App here above head, House of Judah IFC. H.O. Judah, H.O. Judah, as you see it overhead, IFC. We appreciate all of your support and everything that you all are doing. And we're here. It's time to do the work. So
That's right.
You got anything?
Shout out to House of Judah Philippines. Bless y'all.
Shalom, shalom.
Also, our brothers and sisters over in Sierra Leone. I know they're watching right now.
All praises, all praises. So blessings, brothers and sisters. Make sure that you continue sharing this lesson, getting this information out there. The church is growing fast and rapidly. We appreciate all your support. Go to House of Judah Media Channel, House of Judah IFC Media Channel. Check that out. Get on Patreon. Subscribe to the Patreon. There's going to be a lot of content going up on there. I'm going to be personally creating a lot of content that's going up. So definitely stay involved. We're going to have some things coming out for the kids as well, for the children. So keep an eye out. There's a lot coming. So we appreciate all of your support.
All praises.
All praises. All praises.
Bless you all. We'll see you next time.
Shalom.
Y'all be blessed.